Hi, my name's David, and today we're not going over my card game, we're going over a game I've already made. So, this is my custom Magic the Gathering cube that is themed around the video game League of Legends. I've been playing Magic since I was about 12 and playing League since I was about maybe 16. So a little over a decade for both those games, and I am a big fan of both of these IPs. Eventually, as I grew up and grew older and wanted to keep messing around with this game design, I stumbled upon a series of excellent videos by an old Minecraft creator named SethBling, who was making a Mario Magic the Gathering cube. Heavily inspired by this, I decided to make my own. I'd already been tinkering around with some ideas, and I really locked in on the League of Legends one. So this is just going to be an overview of the set. In the next few videos, I'm going to go more in depth into each of the cards and each of the archetypes. But for today, I want to go over the general overview of the set, as well as each of the mechanics that make up each of the major factions for the game. So let's just jump into it. So this set is what I like to call a massive set. Originally, when I was running the numbers for how big I wanted the set to be, I was thinking about the different archetypes that I wanted in the game, and I decided that 5 archetypes is not enough to capture all of League of Legends. And luckily for me, there's about 10 major factions, 11 if you squint, and we've squinted, so we've included them. 10 factions means that we have to have 10 viable draft archetypes, whereas most Magic sets only have 5. So in order to compensate for this, I've made the set big. As we go through each of the mechanics and each of the archetypes themselves, I'll kind of explain more of their cards and more of their vibes and what the design idea behind those cards and those effects was. But we're just going to go down the line today. We're just going to go over each of the archetypes, starting with our blue-white archetype, our Azorius archetype, with Azir, the Sunborn King, leading us into Shurima. So, as we can see here, we have Azir, the Sunborn King. He's a 4-mana 3/3. He is a legendary creature. Legends play a big role in this game, not only because there's a bunch of named creatures, but also it's the League of Legends, so Legendary Matters is a sub-theme across the entire set. He is an Ascended Champion. Champions also go along with that legendary theme. When Azir enters the battlefield, you create 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. This is a reference to his in-game ability of summoning little dudes to fight for him. He also says when you activate Memoir on a creature card, you may return Azir from your graveyard to the battlefield. So Memoir is a keyword that shows up across the Shurima archetype, and we don't have it on a card here, but I'll explain what it is. And when we get into the Shurima section of the videos, we'll be able to see that a lot more on a lot of those cards. So, Memoir is kind of like Flashback. If you have a card in the graveyard, you can pay its Memoir cost, which is typically a little bit less than its casting cost. You exile that card that you paid the Memoir cost from your graveyard, and then you can return any other card that shares a card type from your graveyard back to your hand. So Azir says when you activate the Memoir of a creature, so you would have 2 creatures plus Azir in your discard pile. There we go. 2 creatures plus Azir in your discard pile. This one activates its Memoir cost, exiling itself from the graveyard, adding this one back to your hand, and then Azir just appears on the battlefield. And then when he enters the battlefield, you get his ETB trigger to create 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens for only 4 mana, and the Memoir, when he comes out of the graveyard, it's free. So this is a big part of the Shurima archetype. They are a control deck where you can play your cards out, and then your cards from graveyard can recycle your other cards to keep playing them back out. So this kind of creates this control archetype in blue-white for Shurima. Next up, we've got our white and black archetype in the Lunar or the Mount Targon, the Lunari and the Solari. This is actually not captured by one creature, but by 2. We've got Leona and Diana. So Leona is our mono white version of our Targon leaders, our Targon Mythic. She is just a 4-mana 3/5. She's got Vigilance, and she's got Sunlight. While it is your turn, Leona and up to 1 other creature you control have lifelink. So Sunlight just says, while it is your turn, do something, right? This is one of the keywords of the Mount Targon archetype. And Diana is a 5-mana 5/3 with First Strike and Moonglow. While it is not your turn, Diana and up to 1 other creature you control has Death Touch. So Leona and Diana have a very symbiotic relationship in the lore. They're from opposing factions that are trying to compete for Mount Targon, but they're also gay lovers. So Leona, the idea here is that you play Leona on 4, and then you play Diana on 5, and then Leona gives herself and Diana lifelink during your turn, and so she can first strike in. And then Diana gives both Leona and Diana Death Touch on your opponent's turn, so it's harder for them to attack you, right? This also plays kind of like a mid-range, a little bit more of a control archetype. Their cards tend to be pretty expensive, but they tend to get a lot of value on the turn that they're supposed to, basically. And so it allows your opponent to kind of play around it, and also forces you to play around when your strengths are on your own cards. Next up, we've got the red-white archetype of Demacia, led here again by 2 champions. We've got Garen and Lux. So in the lore, Demacia is a very anti-mage faction of the game. They are big soldiers in big armor, and they do not like magic. But the the leader of the Crown Guard is Garen, and his sister Lux is a very powerful mage. And there's lots of powerful mages throughout Demacia. So this kind of creates the kind of archetyping of this faction, where we look at Garen here. He's a 5-mana 4/4, also a legendary creature, Knight Champion. He has Haste, Vigilance, First Strike, Petricite 3. Petricite 3 is kind of like Ward in that it says when your opponent targets this card, counter that spell unless they pay, in this case, 3 life. This was a keyword that I came up with most of this cube during COVID, so I was very proud of this one when a little bit after I came up with this mechanic, the original Strixhaven set that debuted Ward was revealed, and I had a keyword that was very similar to it, so I was very happy with that. Garen also says prevent the first 2 damage that we dealt to Garen each turn because he's a big tanky boy. This also kind of hints at a part of the Demacia archetype that is keyword soup. A lot of these Demacia like knight dudes have just a ton of keywords. And then we get Lux, who kind of works more on the spell casting side of this. The faction here, you cast spells to buff your guys, and then some of the spellcasters get buffs, and then the guys carry the buffs quite well because they have a bunch of keywords. Lux here says it's a 4-mana 4/3. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Lux deals 2 damage to any target, and whenever Lux attacks, Lux and up to 1 other creature you control gain +0/+3 until end of turn. This kind of creates the aggressive archetype that is our red-white. You want to be playing dudes that have a bunch of keywords, swinging with them, and then casting spells to buff your guys so they can live combat and kill your opponent's stuff. This is kind of the archetype of Demacia. Next up, we've got our last white archetype here, our white-green Bandle City, led by Teemo. He is a 2-mana 2/3. He is a Yordle champion, and I thought it would be fun that all the Yordles in this set have an offset attack and defense, so none of them are the same attack as their defense. So Teemo here is a 2-mana 2/3, and he's got the Traverse keyword. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a permanent card, create a 1/1 green mushroom creature token with Death Touch. So this is Teemo's classic mushrooms that he plants on the battlefield in the game, and then when your opponents walk over them, they explode and they take a bunch of damage. So they're little 1/1s with Death Touch. The Traverse keyword here is whenever something happens, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a permanent card, do something, right? So this says a lot about what the Bandle City archetype wants to be. It wants to be playing a bunch of permanents, and it's a kind of mid-range deck where you are playing creatures and enchantments and artifacts and lands that then reveal cards off the top of your deck to reveal more creatures, artifacts, enchantments, and lands to then keep snowballing your advantage as the cards tend to be overstated when they trigger their effects, but a little bit understated when they don't. Next up, we've got into our black-blue archetype, our Dimir archetype with the Shadow Isles and Karthus Death's Lament. So this is a 6-mana 3/3. Whenever a non-token Karthus dies, create a token that's a copy of Karthus. And whenever a token Karthus dies, deal 3 damage to all opponents. He also has Harrowing 3, which says when this creature dies, create 3 1/1 blue and black spirit creature tokens with flying. Longtime Magic fans will notice that Harrowing here is just on life from the Ravnica Allegiance set that is typically in black-white. I've just color shifted it to black-blue because Shadow Isles worked better for black-blue than black-white. This also shows us what the Shadow Isles deck likes to do. It cares about death, it cares about creatures dying, and it makes a bunch of tokens to help support that. Karthus specifically here has an ability in-game where when he dies, he stays alive for a little bit longer, and typically this lets him cast his ultimate move, which does damage to every opponent on the field, right? So this is whenever a non-token Karthus dies, you create a copy of him, so this is him dying and going into his ghost form. You still create the 3 1/1s though, every time he dies. And then whenever a token Karthus dies, you deal 3 damage to all opponents. So this is him casting his ultimate. And then when he dies again, you get the 3 Harrowing again. Next up, we've got our blue-red archetype in Piltover and Zaun, and here we've got Jace and Victor to represent those two. We've got Jace, kind of the leader of the Piltover side of things, and Victor, the leader of the Zaun side of things. Again, this cube was all made during 2020, so all this came out before Arcane came out, and kind of revamped some of these characters. Victor especially kind of got revamped from this, but we'll go over these guys one at a time. So this is Jace, Genius Inventor. He is a 5-mana 5/5 with Research. Research is very similar to the keyword the City's Blessing from the original Ixalan set, where it says if you control artifacts with total mana value of 10 or greater, you become an inventor for the rest of the game. And then certain cards will trigger stuff if you're an inventor, right? So as we see on the rest of Jace's text here, he says 2 mana, target non-creature artifact becomes an artifact creature in addition to its other types with power and toughness equal to its converted mana cost until the end of the turn. If you are an inventor, instead, this effect does not end at the end of the turn. So he can animate your little artifacts, your little tokens, your little your mana rocks maybe some value pieces, and he can turn them into creatures for the turn. but then if you're an inventor, then they're permanent. And if we go look at Victor, Source of Evolution, also a 5 mana, but he's a 1/4, has 2 mana, target non-artifact creature becomes an artifact creature in addition to its other types until end of turn. If you're an inventor, instead this effect doesn't end at the end of your turn. And Victor gets +2/+0 for each artifact you control. So Victor is very good at turning on research because he can take your non-artifact creatures and make them artifacts, including himself. So this can really increase your mana value count for your cards. But notably, when you activate his effect to turn on Inventor, you're not an Inventor when you activated the effect, so they still turn off for that turn, but then you're Inventor for the rest of the game. So the next couple times you activate it, you can permanently make dudes, and then Victor starts getting out of control fast and getting really, really big really, really quickly. So this is our artifact deck, our Izzet artifact deck that plays a little more mid-rangey, where you are trying to kind of play out some artifacts, play out some artifact creatures, and then stick one of your research cards, or just resolve a research card so that you're an Inventor for the rest of the game, and then your cards are just better than your opponent's on rate. And it's up to the opponent to keep you off from being an Inventor kind of throughout the game in order to stop that from happening. Because as soon as that happens, your cards get a lot better. Next up, we've got Irelia, wrapping up our blue archetypes here with Ionia. This is Irelia, the Warrior Dancer. She is a 5 mana 4/4 with United. Whenever you cast a United spell for the first time each turn, untap each permanent you control with United. So this tells us a lot about what the Ionia archetype is going to be doing. They want to be casting cards they want to be tapping their creatures or tapping their permanents and then casting a card to untap their creatures so that they can tap them again. And whether this is just basically pseudo vigilance in a Simic deck or some actual like tap abilities, tap untap, twiddle style effects that we see all over blue and a little bit in green. The rest of her text here is green-blue Simic. Tap another untapped creature you control. Irelia gains your choice of Trample, Vigilance, or Hexproof. This is a very powerful ability because it means that she can swing in with Vigilance, and then you can tap her on your opponent's turn for some value with the Ionia cards, and then maybe you cast the United spell so it untaps your whole team. She also gets Hexproof, so she is very difficult to kill as long as you have another untapped creature. She also has Trample, so she's also difficult to block, but she's still not that powerful. She's only a 4/4. So this also kind of implies a lot of things about the Ionia archetype in that they are quite tricky. They often are weaker on stats, but have extra utility options built into them with their tap abilities, and they are kind of our combo deck of the cube. They're not like an infinite combo deck, but they are certainly a very high synergy, high potential output combo style deck, where if you have enough United cards on the board that all have some minor value tap effects, and you're able to resolve a couple United cards over the course of a couple turns, you can really snowball out of the game. Really the only way your opponent has to stop you is killing your pieces so that you can't combo them with a ton of value. Moving into our red archetypes, we've got our red-black here for Noxus. This is Swain, the Vision of Noxus, coming in as a 5 mana 4/5. He's got the keyword Strength, which is the keyword that a lot of the Noxus cards have. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control creatures with total power 8 or more, draw a card. So Strength here is very similar to, I believe it's Ferocious or Formidable from the Khans of Tarkir set, where the Strength part here says if you control creatures with total power 8 or more, do a thing. So this is all about strength. This is all about power. This is another one of our aggro decks. Our Demacia deck is our first aggro deck, and our Noxus deck is our second aggro deck. These two factions hate each other in the world, in the lore, and so I thought it was very fun to make them both an aggro deck, one being red-white, one being red-black. Swain also says the first spell you cast each turn costs 1 less to cast. He is kind of the tactician, the mastermind behind the Noxus force, and so these are some very mid-range effect texts on a very aggro-focused archetype, which means they can really keep up and snowball into that mid and late game as they are beating your entire ass. Their cards cost less and they draw more cards than you, so they just keep blowing you up, basically. Next up, we've got Gangplank, the Pirate Lord, bringing us into our Golgari and our Bilgewater archetype. He is a 4 mana 3/4. He says if a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, instead exile that card and create a treasure token. He also says whenever you sacrifice a treasure, Gangplank the Pirate Lord gains +1/+1 until end of turn. This also tells you a lot of things about the Bilgewater archetype, is that they're a bunch of pirates that care about treasures. They're a green-black archetype. So the black part of this archetype tends to care about treasures and hitting your opponent to create treasures. And then the green part of this archetype, for those who are familiar with the Bilgewater lore, they have a bunch of big-ass sea serpents around their little pirate bay. So the green part of this is the big ass sea serpents. So this deck wants to be playing out your aggressive black creatures to create a bunch of treasures to ramp into your big explosive giant sea serpents to close out the game that way. And Gangplank kind of does this all on his own in that when your opponent's creatures are dying, typically to combat as he or the other pirates are swinging in, they get exiled so they don't go to the graveyard. He kills them for real, and then makes a treasure. And then as you're sacrificing those treasures to play your big things, Gangplank is also also getting big. It's only for the turn, so you can have some really explosive turns with Gangplank alongside some very powerful Sea Serpent cards. But this also ends up making one of our kind of more aggressive tempo-based decks, where you are attacking early to ramp out big dudes in the mid game instead of the late game. And wrapping up our last archetype here of the 10, we've got Tryndamere the War King, bringing in our Gruul archetype for the Freljord, with a very disapproving thumbs down for you specifically, viewer. So he is a 4-mana 5/4, so he's already a little bit overstated, and then he's also got text. So he says War Chant 2. War Chant says, whenever this creature attacks, you may reveal a creature card from your hand, and then that creature gets, in this case, +2/+2 until end of turn. So the Freljord are all about sticking together and banding together, and so when you reveal a creature in your hand, that is them kind of being inspired by their allies, inspired by their ancestors, and getting into combat a little bit greater. Tryndamere also says other creatures you control have War Chant too. So he inspires your entire team, and all you have to do is keep one creature in hand and just keep revealing it in order to really pump up your entire team. But it is only for the turn, so on the defense, they're not great. This rounds out another one of our aggressive archetypes, trying to balance that tension between playing a bunch of creatures out and swinging with them, as well as holding at least a card in hand so that you can keep revealing to make your guys a little overstated only while they're attacking. This is a very aggressive deck, and if you're caught with your pants down, this deck can kill you out of nowhere. And then, because they're such an important part to the League of Legends lore, and also we need to round out some colorless cards for the cube, we have the Void. So this card is the Fall of Ithaca, or Icatha, Icathia. I watched the Odyssey recently, so I'm pronouncing it slightly wrong. Fall of Icathia is a 5-mana colorless legendary sorcery. So this follows the other legendary rules that were introduced with the Dominaria set, where in order to cast a legendary sorcery or instant, you must control a legendary creature or planeswalker. And there's no planeswalkers in the set, so legendary creatures. But there's a ton of legendary creatures in this set, even down to uncommon, so this is not that hard to do, though it is something you have to keep an eye out for. This says, each colorless creature you control gains tap consume. If the opponent has no cards in hand, they lose 1 life instead until the end of the turn. And then it defines what consume is. To consume, target opponent exiles a card from their hand until this permanent leaves the battlefield. So you kind of let your creatures do like an O-ring Thoughtseize style effect, but your opponent gets to pick what card it is. They're exiled face up, so you get to see what cards are in their hand, and when your creature dies, it'll go back to their hand, but you still know what it is. But this shows you kind of what the Void archetype wants to be doing. They want to be eating away at your opponent's hand, which is a very dangerous effect to be putting in cube, but there's not that many Void cards, and not even all the Void cards do this consume thing. Some of them do other stuff that kind of plays alongside the consume stuff. But being colorless, they are very, very enticing to draft because they can be put in any deck. So that rounds out our archetypes. Keep in tune here to the channel. We're going to be, the next few videos, I think we are going to be going over this cube. I'm very happy. I'm very proud of this cube. And I have it printed out in person. I've done plenty of play tests with this with my friend group, and they all seem to love it, even those who don't really like League of Legends. With that, we will see you guys in the next video, where we're going to go in depth over the Shurima archetype, starting with our boy here, Azir. So we're going to get to see tons of these memoir cards and kind of explain some of the design process behind those cards as I was coming up with them. So we will see you guys in that video.